1863 was an eventful year in the American Civil War. On the East Coast, the Union Army won a costly victory at Gettysburg and sent the Army of Northern Virginia back to the South. On the Mississippi River, General Grant's forces captured Vicksburg, bringing the entire river into federal hands. In the Pacific Theater, on the West Coast, things were far from quiet in the war effort. By the fall of 1863, most people in California had read in the newspapers about the J.M. Chapman incident. In March of that year, some Confederate sympathizers in San Francisco bought a small steamship outfitted to be a privateer, which was to be used for sneak attacks and blockade running to sustain the rebellion. As they were about to make their getaway from the harbor, the rebels were pounced on by the Army, the Navy, and San Francisco police. That incident sparked an interest among bored federal officers in the Pacific Department to see what could be done to boost California's naval defenses in case the Confederates somehow magically showed up with a big naval fleet to steal the West Coast. One of these guys was Lieutenant Colonel James Curtis, the Army's man in charge of the District of Southern California. On November 21, 1863, Curtis sent one of his officers, Major Henry Hancock, on a recon mission to Santa Catalina Island, 20 miles off the mainland. Hancock arrived on a boat, spent some time looking around the island, and found several locations that would make good fortresses to defend Southern California in a hypothetical naval war, either against the CSA or any suddenly hostile European power. He found Isthmus Harbor on the north side of Catalina to be a potential site for a vast naval base that would give the United States a long reach into the Pacific. Remember, the US did not yet possess Hawaii or Alaska, so Catalina Island and the Channel Islands was as far into the Pacific Ocean as there was US soil. Major Hancock reported his findings to Colonel Curtis back in Los Angeles, and Curtis reported his findings to his commanding officer, General George Wright, in San Francisco. General Wright fully agreed that the Army should take possession of Santa Catalina Island, and he deployed Captain Benjamin West with a detachment of infantry to take the island. The only problem with this plan was that there were already 100 people and some 23,000 goats and sheep living on the island at the end of 1863. Also, unbeknownst to Major Hancock or Captain West, General Wright wanted to start a Native American reservation on Catalina Island. General Wright could have cared less about some junior officer's visions of building a sweet naval base on this island. On his radar was every Confederate plot, every range war, every squatter conflict, and every Indian war from San Diego to Seattle. At that time, there was a major war in Northern California where the Army was going after the Klamath, Redwood, Trinity, and other native nations at the same time. This conflict had spilled into southern Oregon and the new Idaho Territory, and it was about to enter its third year. For the Army, there was simply no undoing the encroachments on native lands by settlers and later the military, and General Wright wanted to get rid of the problem as quick as possible by deporting the natives. Wright probably believed that this was the best, most humane option. The Army's policy at the time was to keep natives confined to areas as far from Anglo-American civilization as possible. In other places on the western frontier, the Army was killing natives in territorial disputes and reservation enforcement. But in Wright's case, no one would kill any natives who surrendered to the government, and the natives would be as far removed from American civilization as geographically possible. In theory, they could subsist on fishing and raising livestock, and they would be supplemented with supplies from the federal government, although the history of the reservation system shows that this was a lot easier said than done. However, General Wright never publicly revealed his reason for sending troops to the island. When residents of Los Angeles first read an announcement in the papers on December 28th, announcing that no new settlers would be permitted to settle on the island in 1864, no explanation was given. Then, On the morning of January 1st, 1864, Captain Benjamin West and the 83 men of Company C of the 4th California Infantry Regiment boarded a small fleet of steamboats and landed on the northern side of Catalina Island near Isthmus Harbor. They made their camp on the narrowest point of the island, which overlooks 2 harbors. At first, the soldiers slept in tents, but they quickly built a large barracks along with a few smaller structures like horse corrals, stables, a dock, and they even cut a road. The naval schooner Jessup was also stationed at Catalina Island for 2 reasons: to be the means of communication between the Army camp on Catalina Island and Camp Drum on the mainland, and also for there to be a mobile cannon to protect the strategic island from a hypothetical maritime attack. All of this was much to the chagrin of the locals, most of whom were farmers, miners, and fishermen. Many of them were evicted from their claims and forced to the southern side of the island to make room for a reservation-sized army base on the isthmus. Several shanties were moved from the new army camp's vicinity, though we don't know how many people lived in them or on that chunk of the island. There may or may not have been trading between the garrison of soldiers on the north side of the island and the local residents living on the southern side of the island. It's possible that soldiers might have traded some of their supplies in exchange for alcohol, for example, but I haven't found any definitive sources on that yet. Nonetheless, just knowing soldiers of the U.S. Army, somebody had booze, and somebody got it one way or another. Immediately, rumors flew up and down California that the Army was moving to act against another Confederate naval plot. Was Jeff Davis really trying to steal Catalina Island from the Union? Well, in reality, there was no rebel plot that the Federals were acting against. This was just an operation to support the Army's already ongoing operations in an Indian war in the northwestern part of the state. However, Catalina Island was never used as a reservation. When the natives in the northwest surrendered in August, the Army established a reservation in that region, and General Wright no longer had any use for Catalina Island. By the end of September, all federal property had been removed from the island, and the garrison soon followed. The soldiers broke up their camp at 2 harbors, leaving the barracks building behind, and they returned to the port at Wilmington to Camp Drum. The occupation of Catalina Island was over, having lasted just 9 months. Unfortunately for the board garrison, the rebels never showed up. Catalina Island was used exclusively for civilian peacetime ends for the next 75 years. It once again became a fortress during World War II, when the U.S. Coast Guard set up a patrol barracks and a training base for new recruits. And during the war, it also housed a secret army base where the Signal Corps tried to listen in on faraway enemy communications in the Pacific. Since the 1950s, the island has been a tourist hotspot and a giant HOA for yacht owners. The Civil War-era Army Barracks is still there, and for many years it's been the home to the Isthmus Yacht Club. Thank you for watching the Civil War Wild West Edition. If you haven't already done so, please hit like and subscribe. It really does help out the channel with the algorithms. Have a great day or a great night wherever you are.